Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Azure Bicep learning series. I am Ihan Acho, and today we are diving into a super useful feature in Bicep called Bicep Outputs. If you have been following along, you know that Bicep makes deployment of Azure resources a breeze. But once those resources are deployed, how do you get useful information back? Things like the connection strengths, the resource IDs or endpoints, or things of that from deployments. That's where Bicep output comes in. In this quick session, we will cover what Bicep outputs are and why they matter. We will also look at how to define them in our Bicep files and real life scenarios, examples of how output can save time and effort. Let's jump right in. What are bicep outputs? So bicep outputs are virtually values returned from bicep deployment for use anywhere. So see bicep output more of like receipts from our deployments. Okay, so this could include resource IDs, URLs, keys that you can use in other templates, scripts, or pipelines. Okay, so basically, Bicep help us to share deployment information between templates and processes. Bicep output supports different data types. It supports the string data types, ideal for names, URLs, connection strings, and strings in generally. So it also supports Boolean values, such as the deployment success flags, and also feature for toggling on and off or true or false kind of output. So it also supports objects, data type, and array data type, which is more like complex data structures for resource properties and also multiple values. I also support the integer data type, which are normally numerical values such as resource counts, IDs, port numbers, and things like that. Assigning a bicep output is straightforward in a bicep file. We use the keyword output followed by the name of the output, then its data type, and of course the equals to sign to assign a value. We'll just quickly look at some simple basic output examples. The first one of the list here is the storage access key. Here we see that we are defining an output storage key, which is a string, okay, and we're also assigning the value of that string. Now, if you look very well, you'll see that we are using this secure decorator. This is to max the value so it doesn't show in the deployment log. Say for reasons we need to grab this out and probably pass it to other deployments, and this might be a way to get that value. So we have another one here, which is the app service URL. Probably after deploying an app service, we also want to get this information, probably pass it to another automation system. So this is a very simple one where we are also defining a string. So similarly, we have the SQL connection string, just like the storage access key here is also using a secure decorator because we want to max the value from showing deployment log. Lastly, here we have the resource IDs, which is from what we see here is a VNet ID output, which is probably just getting the VNet ID of a deployment from a virtual network. So these are just very simple basic example. As we progress, we'll look at more enhanced example and real life scenario to how this is being used. There are four primary ways to consume bicep outputs. Okay, we have the CLI queries. These are fantastic for debugging. If you have just deployed something and you want to quickly verify, say, an IP address or a resource ID or other value, you can just query the deployment from your command line. It's quick, it's direct, and it's perfect for those immediate checks. Next is where Bicep truly shines for reusability. We have module references. When you deploy a Bicep module, that module can expose outputs. You can then reference this output directly in another part of your Bicep code, allowing you to chain deployments and build complex infrastructure from smaller reusable blocks. Think of it as passing information seamlessly between different parts of your infrastructure definition. For automation and continuous integration and continuous deployment, otherwise known as CI/CD, we can leverage pipeline variables as Azure Bicep outputs. When Bicep deployments run within CI/CD pipelines, whether that's Azure DevOps, GitLab CI, GitLab Actions, or any other system, we can capture those Bicep outputs and then promote them as pipeline variables. This means that next steps within this pipeline can use those variables, perhaps to configure application, update a data DB, or trigger another entire workflow. So this actually finds a very good way to consume Bicep's outputs. And finally, we have cross deployment. This kind of emphasizes the flow of information between entirely separate deployments. You can deploy one bicep template and capture its output, and then use this output as input parameters for a subsequent bicep deployment. This enables sophisticated kind of orchestration of your infrastructure, building dependency where one deployment succeeds and its resulting value is being fed into the next one as parameters. So, to summarize it all, Bicep outputs are not just for show, of course, they're essential for debugging, for building reusable and modular infrastructure, for automating workflows, and for creating sophisticated cross deployment workflows. Understanding how to leverage these four channels is key to truly mastering biceps. Moving beyond the basics of consuming outputs, Biceps offers some really powerful advanced techniques that allows you to make your deployment even flexible, secure, and dynamic. Let's look at some four key ones. Here we have the conditional output. Just like you can conditionally deploy resources in Bicep, you can also conditionally output values. This is incredibly useful when certain piece of information might only exist or be relevant based on deployment conditions or like parameters. Okay, so the core idea is simple. It uses the ternary operator. You define a condition, and if that condition is kind of true, okay, you output one value. If false, you output another, often an empty array or a kind of null value. Okay, so let's imagine a scenario. Say, for instance, we have a template that deploys a public IP address. Okay, and this will be depending if the for you to output the public IP address, it depends if the IP address actually exists, right? So if for instance we have like a parameter, say like should deploy public IP addresses true, then we'll expect to have a public IP address that we can kind of output, right? So let's look at this simple template and deploy this. So we see that once should deploy public IP parameter is set as true, the public IP ID resource will be returned. If it is false, okay, so what do we expect? The output public IP will simply be an empty string, preventing an error because the resource wouldn't have been deployed. So that's just based on this condition. So if the condition is met, there will be an output. If it's not, there won't be an output. So yeah. Output transformation simply involves using bicep functions to reshape the way a bicep output appears. Okay, these functions could be concatenate, JSON, array, and so many other functions out there that helps you to reshape the structure of a bicep output. Usually, deployment logs could as well contain secret values. So for these secret values not to be logged in the deployment history, we need to mark it as a sensitive using the secret decorator. With this in place, this secret value are sensitive and not displayed in the logs. An output loop is used to say return information about multiple resources as a single structured output. What happens is we iterate over an array and create say one single output entry for each item in that list. Let's look at this example. Here the loop goes through each traffic zones and uses this index I to reference the corresponding NXG created before now, right? So this makes it easy for scripts or pipelines to consume these details like names, resource IDs without defining multiple individual outputs. Now let's look at some of the best practices that applies to applying bicep outputs. So we must maintain clear, consistent naming system that by themselves they suggest what this output is, right? So we'll stick to using clear, short, clean, self-explanatory names for our outputs. Then also when it comes to security awareness, we must be understand that any output that is a secret, okay, say like connection string or whatever it is that is secret that we don't want to appear in deployment logs, we have to use the secured decorator like we have practically explained throughout this section. So we use this to mark sensitive data. Now, when documenting is infrastructure as a code, which also allows us to add in comments, complementary, simple informations really just by bringing in that comment flags into our code. Okay, we can as well pass in decorators, okay, to as well pass information about our deployment, but keep it simple and use decorator when it matters most. Minimal, I mean, output only what you need. You don't need to output all the information that probably not relevant in your next deployment or don't really add much values, right? So we'll stick to as minimum required information, especially dependent information for probably the next line of deployment to proceed. All right. So thank you for this session. Thanks for keeping it us we here with us. See you in the next session. Bye.